Hi there, and welcome to the channel. I'm so glad you're here. I wasn't prepared. I'll go make some tea. Your clothes look great, by the way. Your hair is awesome. I hope you have hair. If you're bald, I'm so sorry. That's neither here nor there. My name is Bobby, and welcome to my first long-form-ish YouTube essay. I picked this topic partly because it was just keeping me awake at night, but also because I kind of thought that maybe this would be a pretty quick video to whip together that I could probably get it done in a few days, but I've spent 2 weeks on this. There are so many episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience, and there is so much stuff that I did not know that has honestly made me go from being ambivalent about the guy and sort of just enjoying putting the podcast on in the background sometimes to actively disliking him. He said a lot of stuff that I'm just not cool with. That being said though, I've done my best to make this essay in good faith. I'm not here to make you dislike Joe Rogan or to defend him. I'm here to talk about a broader issue, which is the public's mistrust in institutions and experts and their reliance on social proof, and using the Joe Rogan Experience as a lens is just to me, it seemed like the best way to do that. In case you're interested in some of the things that have influenced my opinion of Rogan, I've included links in the description with examples not only of some of the stuff he said, but also commentary and conversations about those topics from points of view that I think are worth considering as you form your own opinion. Also, vaccines are safe and effective and not a tool for government mind control. And oh, would you look at that? Dr. Michael Osterholm, highly recommended, must listen. Anyway, let's go! In early 2020, at the pandemic's onset, government bodies were at a loss for how best to combat the virus. Take this tweet from the Surgeon General from February of that year.
Seriously, people, stop buying masks. They are not effective in preventing general public from catching the bad thing.
Based on all the evidence we had at the time, this was likely the best advice. But with new evidence came new guidance. In April of 2020, the CDC said that masks were helpful, actually, even though the president himself refused to wear one. How's that for mixed messaging? And despite conclusive scientific evidence showing the effectiveness of wearing a mask, many people's trust in the messengers had become so eroded and broken that they refused to listen to them. Suddenly people were screaming about them in stores, cutting holes in them and breathing on people, and burning them in the street as a form of political protest? Like, really?
God, are you serious?
Son, people can see you.
Because of the admittedly pretty raw line of messaging from the CDC, people got weird. But it didn't take long for serious scientific inquiry to provide the evidence for masks' efficacy. Just check the description below, I've included many. Contrast that, though, with another controversial claim that I've heard repeated my whole life, that the phytoestrogens in soybeans can cause men's bodies to change as if they were taking actual human estrogen.
I think soy lowers your testosterone.
I think it's like estrogen.
Yeah. Soy isoflavones can produce estrogen-like activity in the body, mimicking the effects of natural estrogen. Yeah, but I think
you can grow titties off of soy?
Not quite, but it might feminize you.
But here's the problem. It's completely made up. Neither soy foods nor isoflavone supplements alter measures of bioavailable testosterone concentrations in men. Yet the myth persists. And it's not just Joe Rogan. Lots of people still believe this, even though actual evidence proves it's just bro science. Okay, good luck with the fucking planet. You can have it now. Bye! Joe Rogan has created a brand out of being folksy, inquisitive, and mildly absurd.
Doing research on this currently. I want to direct everyone to hashtag space is fake, because I've been doing research on space being fake.
The first time I heard the guy's podcast, I actually hadn't pieced together that this was the dude who used to host Fear Factor.
Maggot-covered cheese.
You guys remember when we had Playboy Playmates on the show?
I also have like a vague recollection of girls jumping on trampolines. Seems like low-hanging fruit to me. So stupid. I hated both of these shows, but for Fear Factor in particular, it always just seemed too tame to actually deliver on the promise of the premise. Like spiders. Please, easy. Though if you were to tape my eyes open and force me to stare at my bank account for very long, I'd probably say fuck it eventually too. Since the show's first episode back in the halcyon days of 2009, the entire premise has been that Rogan just sits in his chair, drinks, smokes
Elk meat,
and talks out his ass like all of us do. when we're really just not that worried what the person across the table from us thinks.
And why
Because
don't
I
you
don't
believe?
need a study. I don't need to read something to verify.
This works particularly well here in this context because about half the time, the person across the table from him is about to or has recently said something that makes you do a double take, like a cartoon wolf.
Did you talk about that alien craft that came into our
What happened? We talked
into our
about
galaxy?
It did?
The one with the Hawaiian name?
Oh, so it's over.
You didn't hear about that one?
The one that looks like a joint?
I basically just associate the show with the warm, familiar feeling of knowing there's always an incredibly long and frivolous conversation going on that I am guaranteed to never finish listening to. But recently, Rogan has ass-talked himself into a corner. Which is fair enough. If you keep making uninformed statements to large enough groups of people, you're going to say something that's hard to back up or that makes you look dumb, like say indulging in repeating vaccine conspiracy theories that have no basis in actual real life, that do serve a political agenda for certain groups of people, and that are also harmful. But he's apologized a bunch of times now, and despite what many of the takes I've read and watched say, I think that I buy it. I really don't think he's meant to cause harm to anyone. Not that any bad actors have ever used that as an excuse before. I'm not here to address that though. What I'm interested in is why would anybody care what he said either way? Why would anyone want to cancel Joe Rogan more than somebody else?
You're moving one step closer to dictatorship. That's what the fuck is happening. That's what's gonna happen with a vaccine passport. That's what's gonna happen if they close borders. You can't enter New York City unless you have your papers.
And why would somebody like Rogan, who's never even claimed to be an expert on anything, be influential enough that, a group of over 260 doctors, nurses, scientists, and educators would write an open letter to Spotify saying this is not only a scientific or medical concern, it is a sociological issue of devastating proportions, and Spotify is responsible for allowing this activity to thrive on its platform. Damn, okay, I'm listening. Remember, Rogan is not a journalist or a politician or a virologist. Well, buckle up, y'all, because another random guy on the internet has slapped together a spicy hot take filled with nuance and pseudo-intellectualism. And he wants to ask this question. Why the hell does anyone care what Joe Rogan says about vaccines anyway? Journalism, or the media, is often called the fourth estate. The media has a massive amount of power to not only recount the goings-on of government, but also to frame those events and debates in the broader social context. Say you're taking a college class, but you aren't in the classroom when the professor gives an assignment and describes it verbally. It's imperative that you trust a person to recount those instructions to you secondhand. Your grade depends on accurately understanding the assignment, and so your classmate better be trustworthy. According to a Gallup poll, America's trust in media in 2016 was at its lowest since the organization began actually polling it. And at the end of 2021, it wasn't much higher than it was in 2016. And the situation doesn't look a lot better for our government. A quick perusal of the polling in this article, which includes data going back to 1997, shows a similar loss of trust in the institutions of our own government. And is it any wonder? I mean, in 2016, a reality TV star who lost the popular vote became president of a sharply divided country. For so many, trust in our institutions was broken, or at least breaking. Which brings us back to the Joe Rogan Experience. There are some who are calling on Spotify to drop the podcast from their platform on the basis of Rogan's presentation of vaccine misinformation. Hold on, Bobby, you say to me. I think I remember you saying something like ages ago. What was it? Oh yeah, Rogan isn't a journalist or a scientist, and he doesn't claim to be. Furthermore, he's made several apologies, which many believe to have been genuine. Speaking of apologies, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that his first apology video is on the JRE Spotify page, and I think you should listen to it if you haven't already. Like I said before, I think I see where Rogan is coming from here, and I can empathize. While I don't think the issue is as simple as he frames it, I also don't think a lot of the media coverage I've seen portrays him with much nuance either, so go listen to it and let me know in the comments what you think. So why call for his cancellation, especially when compared to the likes of, say, Tucker Carlson, who, and I shit you not, once got out of a slander lawsuit because Fox News themselves claimed and a judge agreed that the general tenor of the show should then inform a viewer that Carlson is not stating actual facts about the topics he discusses, and is instead engaging in exaggeration and non-literal commentary. His own network says he's full of shit and nobody cares. And if we're talking about Spotify in particular, what about Eric Clapton, who claimed he'd been coerced into being vaccinated by the pharmaceutical industry through the technique of mass formation hypnosis, which is a conspiracy theory propagated by, most notably, Dr. Robert Malone, who, coincidentally, was also a guest on Rogan's podcast. But it would be misleading to think that it's just stuff that Robert Malone has said that's got people angry. Here's that clip from earlier.
COVID to like 12 different fucking people at the Comedy Store. Some of them vaccinated, some of them not.
Just listening to it on the surface, it sounds legit, and it got me thinking, oh, I've never heard some of this stuff. Is it serious? Should I be skeptical? One of Joe's claims in this video, that vaccinated people can still transmit the virus, we already know that part's true. But kids, I have a Google machine, and I used it to look some shit up. While you can still spread the virus, the vaccinated are also less likely to get infected in the first place, which means that the virus is spreading less. Boosters are common for many vaccines and always have been. Yes, even the polio vaccine. Proving you've had certain vaccines is common for doing lots and lots of things, like traveling and going to school. We already have to do that. He also mentions vaccine-driven virulence evolution.
It protects you from really being like badly hospitalized or death, but doesn't stop you from getting the virus, can possibly lead to more potent viruses.
But let's take a look at a 2020 paper, which says explicitly in the introduction, our findings indicate that while vaccine-driven virulence evolution in SARS-CoV-2 is a theoretical risk, the consequences of this event would be limited for vaccinated populations.
Try finding that story anywhere.
Why hadn't you heard about this before? Because vaccination will protect you from this too. Fuck. But he's not an expert. What's the harm? How did we get to a place where a show like the JRE can be treated with the scrutiny that it has been, and that some people see it not only as a powerful enough antagonistic force to call for its removal from Spotify, but also as a public health threat? I think to answer that, we need to go back in time a little ways. I'm not that old, but let's just say that when the first episode of the Joe Rogan Experience aired, I was a much different Jimmy eating a much different world. The Overton window is a concept that's used to explain and understand which policies or talking points are acceptable in current political discourse. For instance, a Democrat may be able to legitimately propose Medicaid expansion as an acceptable step in alleviating poverty in 2022 America, but would likely find that universal basic income would be an unacceptable step to most.
That's the argument for universal basic income, right?
It's certainly a strong one, and
Basically, it would fall outside of the Overton window. In 2009, the Overton window was different. It was in a different place. To the general public, the Illuminati and deep state cabals and chemtrails were considered fringe ideas, and talking about them had a different vibe, you know? Listening to Joe Rogan bat around ideas like these with his guests was non-threatening. I mean, almost charming. Quaint, even. It had the vibe of visiting a Ripley's Believe It or Not museum, or maybe more like a circus sideshow. It was inviting us to ogle at the bearded lady, or a dwarven powerlifter, or a snake person. Maybe we should have, but it didn't feel as icky back then. But, and yeah, you probably know where this is going, some shit has gone down! And by 2016, many of us were for the first time keenly aware that people were saying things openly and unironically from positions of power that served a pretty insidious purpose. When Donald Trump was elected president, such an unmitigated stream of conflicting claims and decontextualized meta-commentary issued forth that the Overton window began to shift. It was like at least half the country was, before long, making up whatever alternative facts they felt right about saying.
And they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point is...
And why shouldn't they? It was modeled from the top down, not just from the Oval Office, but from entire TV networks, going 24 hours a day. And as long as it infuriated the right people, the algorithms carried it to the top and the networks encouraged it. It was reminiscent of another event in my lifetime that I could remember shifting the discourse. 9/11. I was just a kid, but I remember the change in tone from TV personalities and my teachers. But in 2016, there was one monumental difference. This time, we had social media. Are any of y'all old enough to remember when Facebook was, fun, actually?
I want to brass up. I'm loving other game.
But our relationship is only 2 days. Please don't brag.
I'm not loving you. Got out from my life.
I'm not leaving without you! Imagine it. Facebook, but our parents didn't have accounts yet. YouTube videos were seldom more than 3 minutes long, and they were accusing us of having short attention spans back then. But that was the internet of the past. Now, Facebook and Twitter in particular had reached a critical mass of sorts. What was fringe became the mainstream, and people were engaging in the kind of hateful speech that had previously flourished only on message board sites like 4chan. Isolated pockets of bad actors could find each other with ease now, could organize and influence the broader discourse. And so they did. Dear Father Algorithm, may his name be ever praised. Blessed only the most outrageous and explosive posts. Those who pleased him received the thrilling endorphin rush of engagement and social validation, while only the most inflammatory of those posts would rise to the top. Everybody was an authority in their own echo chambers. Bad ideas got worse and worse, and the innocent promise of social media, our safe haven, our youth culture promised land, turned into Pompeii. And as the flames rose, the only sounds any of us could hear over the crackling carnage were the screams of millions of minions memes howling their infuriating gibberish. By 2020, mainstream media had become so adept at creating a tone of panic and direness that even I can sympathize with people getting tired of being told to take everything so goddamn seriously all the time. I also understand that, just like the examples at the beginning of this video, experts don't always do everything right either. You should really check out Philosophy Tube's video on that subject. But here's the thing. Just because you don't trust X expert, that doesn't mean that Aunt Hilda or some rando from 4chan is automatically right. Just because something feels right to you or fits with the way you see the world doesn't mean it is. And that goes for anybody in any political party of any persuasion. In his 1984 book, Influence, Science, and Practice, Robert Cialdini coined the term social proof, which documents the phenomenon wherein people model the behaviors of those around them when they're trying to figure out what to do or how to think. Around them. I'm from Oklahoma. It's common and rational to look at the person next to you when you're trying to figure out how to react to, say, a global pandemic. But there's a problem here. If you don't trust authority figures, are in fact strongly advised by your in-group leaders not to, then where do you go for answers? Who do you trust? It turns out that for many, it was just whoever was loudest in their Facebook timeline. And since the algorithm is designed to keep you scrolling, not to verify or dispute spurious claims, then of course, it's just the most explosive, clickable, and controversial statements that will rise to the top. Just offhand, how many listeners do you think the Joe Rogan Experience gets every episode? If you guessed 11 million, then congratulations, dear viewer, you're fucking right. And when those listeners' relationship to truth has become as nebulous as it has, then suddenly it doesn't matter whether you intended to or not. You've become an authority to a lot of people. And in that context, the fringe content that made the Joe Rogan Experience novel and fun in 2009's media landscape has morphed into something a lot different. The deep state gave way to and became QAnon. The caravans we should have been worried about all along were the ones that were marching openly with torches in Charlottesville. And that circus sideshow mentality, making fun of trans, LGBT, ASD people, that changed too. Because thanks to arguably the most awesome thing about the internet, we actually got to know them. realize that we were them. And sticking up for your friends isn't being a snowflake. It's the bare minimum for being a decent human being. The Joe Rogan Experience isn't fringe anymore. It's mainstream. And I can empathize with him in that it doesn't feel fair, but his now massive audience is full of people who will take anything he says or any viewpoint that he deems worth engaging with as truth and use it to back up whatever beliefs they have, whether he meant for it to be taken that way or not. No, but it's like super tender when you touch it though. Yeah. No, but it's like it's not supposed to be that color, is it? Oh my god, are you still here? Holy but I mean like cool. I mean like I'm glad. Thanks so much for sticking around for the entire video. So what do you think? Was I too harsh? Was I not harsh enough? Is probably the second one. I've had an absolute blast putting this video together for y'all. I hope that you've enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing and hitting the like button and the notification bell because I want to do this all the time. Until next time, if you're a podcaster and you do long form, like 4-hour conversations, maybe learn to edit like just a tiny little bit of editing. I'm telling you, it's all in here.